go. We are live. Hello. Hello, all, and welcome back. Simos, you had an intro. What was it? Go ahead. You had the. You said you're going to wait for the appropriate time. I guess not.
We seem to have lost Simos.
That's okay. I'm sure he'll come back. Hey, Nitty, if you want to join, let me know. It's a open panel / conversation tonight. Um, all right, so welcome back, everyone. I have with me here today two very interesting guests that I keep planning on bringing on the channel, but have
One
not.
interesting guest.
One, well, possibly two. If Silas is still here. That I do plan on bringing on the channel. I think Silas is having some technical
I meant
difficulties.
him. I meant him. He was the one interesting guest, and he's left now. So you're stuck with me.
And then I think we're going to be joined later by Christopher Malady, who has been on the channel, if he is up for it. So, Mathpig, how about you introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about who you are. We'll take it from there.
I'm a silly Irishman that talks with lots of interesting people. I'm lucky enough to have a lot of smart friends, so I facilitate conversations. That's probably the best way to put it.
And you do a pretty good job at it, if I do say so myself. I do have Mathpig's channel linked in the description of this video if you're interested. I've been on there a few times, and Simos is back. Hey, Troy, good to see you too. Thanks for stopping by. Simos, are you with us?
Temporarily. His name is Michael Grando, and not a lot of people know that.
I'm slightly annoyed. I've done all this stuff, Michael. It doesn't seem to be running for whatever reason. Because I think you don't have the script, so so it just looks normal. Unfortunately.
Oh, that's okay. It's all right. Mathpig was
Nothing
trying
wrong
to
with
work.
normal. Nothing wrong with
No,
normal,
he's trying to work his fancy technology magic, but
especially in mathematics.
It's
Normal,
supposed to look like
normal
that.
distribution is probably the best.
That's what it's supposed to look like. It's just not working. It's hidden in the bottom if you can see it, Michael.
I can, yeah.
And
Oh,
thank
nice.
you,
Yeah,
thank you,
not nice. Yeah,
thank you for laughing at my maths
stupid
joke as well.
YouTube.
Simos, would you like to
Not a lot of
introduce
people do
yourself?
that. Yeah, I'm Simos, and not a lot of people know that. And also, I have terrible internet connection at the moment, so I'm going to be dropping out every 5 minutes.
Well, it's the joy of you coming back. We always get excited then. It's like, oh, is he coming back? Is he not coming
Yeah,
back?
I know. That's what the last girlfriend said.
And that's why you're here for the dad jokes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she said.
So the loose topic of tonight's discussion. I've had a lot of interesting conversations over the past 2 weeks, both that have gotten me thinking about this idea of evidence and what we accept as evidence and why we believe what we believe, type of thing. And the first stemmed from a conversation that I had on Theology Unleashed with with a fellow historian and a scientist about the nature of Christianity. And I'm also teaching a conspiracy theory class right now. We've had a lot of conversations about. I've posted a few videos on my channel as well, and gotten some interesting comments. So, made me think about what exactly we consider evidence and how evidence functions with respect to belief. Do we need evidence for belief? What sort of evidence do we need for belief? That sort of
Are
thing.
you trying? Right. Well, I'll ask you a question then. Are you asking for evidence to convince me? Are you asking, what is evidence to yourself? What is relevant to the person? You know, like if you're trying to describe to me that you believe something because you've experienced X, that's evidence for you.
Hmm.
Are you talking evidence to convince, say, Simos, where you need a picture of God getting out of the shower?
Either, wherever you want to start with that, and you take that wherever you want to take it.
Well, I mean, obviously, as a somebody that's highly academic, the first question to ask is, what is it? What do you mean by evidence?
Hmm.
Right? Is it? Well, I mean, I'll just let you go, because if we're going to talk epistemology, we need to be clear on our terms, I feel.
Absolutely. But I'm here to interview you two, so
Oh dear.
You're here to enlighten us. All right. This is all on
Okay,
you.
well,
This is
I'll
all
go
on
for
you.
evidence being something which increases the increases the chance of the truth of the proposition.
hmm.
Something like that, maybe.
Say that again, Simos, please.
Well, yeah, I'll rephrase it for you, Mathpig. Something that makes a proposition more likely to be true.
I just didn't hear you over my papers. That's all.
Oh, right. Something like that. But I mean, one of the issues that I have, of course, is it's no good just saying evidence, because evidence can be something as simple as intuition, or just like a group of people, right? Quite often, what do they call it? Something of the masses. What's that word I'm looking for? Wisdom of the masses.
Stupidity of the masses.
Yeah, well, sometimes, but there's an actual thing where if you because of, hey, look, here's a tie-in with something I said earlier, normal distribution, right? So if you ask 100 people to guess at what number is going to be drawn out of a bucket of balls, say, then there will be, it's more likely to be close to the normal distribution of the balls getting picked out. So. And that's just, a statistical variance thing. And so that's kind of the wisdom of the masses, right? You can ask 100 people what they reckon the answer is going to be. You take the average, and it's most likely to be that average, or at least close to the average than it would be if you just asked one person. So I think that's what's meant by wisdom of the masses. But nonetheless, that's a type of evidence, I guess. It's just not very good evidence, because, as it turns out, if you start basing your epistemology on something which is pretty much a guess, right? Then well, that doesn't say much for your epistemology, because we want something more solid than guessing. So. That's where good evidence comes in, and I think good evidence is the thing that significantly raises the proposition being true, rather than just is a raise in the proposition being true. And I think that's what's important. So but this can include other things as well. I'm not just talking about data points here. Obviously, I'm talking about things such as, good arguments, right? Reasons. So deductive arguments which have a conclusion, a necessary conclusion. Of course, that's as good an evidence as you're going to get if the premises are sound. Then you're not going to get any better than that. There's no induction that can get you to a necessary conclusion. In other words, as Hume says. So, what do we mean by it? It's a slippery slope fallacy that we're going to go down if we start trying to define it too closely, I feel. But nonetheless, we've got to do something with it. We can't just leave it hanging, which is why I'm kind of prefacing it by saying it's not just that it's likely to increase the proposition of it being true. It needs something that's substantially more than that if we're going to base a solid epistemology on it. Right? And give us good reasons to believe, because at the end of the day, I think that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for something which will make us believe or convince us in the truth of a proposition.
That's
for
a
that,
long-winded answer.
oh, well,
No, that's okay. That's
I
exactly what I
thought we
wanted.
were doing philosophy, but okay.
Come on, I'm only joking.
I mean, we're in the great debate community, and of course, that's where these questions become most difficult, because quite often there is not going to be something as easy as an inductive argument which is going to give us the answer, right? That's science, right? That's, if you're looking for truth, go into science. Okay, don't go into fucking philosophy, which is going to rely on deductive arguments, because then you're just looking at an endless series of premises, of justification of premises, then, and you're never going to get to the bottom of it. But that's my personal kind of problem of deduction thing. Anyway, does that give you somewhere to go?
It does, yeah. And I don't necessarily disagree with your last statement either. Mathpig, you want to add something to that?
Oh, no. I couldn't add to that at all. I could maybe take away from it. Evidence, something that could be repeated and used to convince other people, something that's not technically personal to yourself.
I like that. I asked the question. What really got me thinking about it. So, I'm teaching a class right now on conspiracy theories, and we're focused on the arguments that are put forward by Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock, which is the idea that there's a lost civilization that existed that is
I've
influenced.
watched a lot of Graham Hancock over the years. A lot of Graham Hancock. That and Ancient Aliens for shits and giggles.
Right.
Yeah.
I did
Another
see your
one.
review as well, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. What do you call him? There's another one you should watch. A South African guy, very obsessed with stitching. I'll put you down his route. Him and Graham would hang out. They're friends, so that would be an interesting one. He's convinced they came here, found his tomb, found the actual spot where and all this. But yeah, sorry, I'm interrupting. Go on ahead.
No, it's all good. So it got me thinking about it because, and so in this class we focused on the not necessarily ancient aliens, but the idea that there's like this lost civilization or lost city that has influenced the rise of other civilizations. And what I find most interesting, and of course, there's like this big debate that's happening because Graham Hancock just released this new series on Netflix, and him and Randall Carlson went on Joe Rogan like a week ago, and so you're talking about this idea being exposed to literally millions and millions of people through like different mediums. But what sparked this is I was having a conversation with somebody, and they said, well, because archaeologically, and I just had a conversation with an archaeologist. We were kind of DMing each other back and forth. Bill Farley just came on my channel, and archaeologically, there is not a, and it's rare that this happens, but there's not a single piece of evidence to support Graham Hancock's idea of a lost civilization. Like none. But it's incredibly popular. And the conversation I was having with somebody was, they said that they didn't really like what I had to say, and so I asked why, and they said because it's not as interesting. Right. So to what degree should an argument be compelling, and does it at some point, now maybe we could play around with this idea a little more, but at some point, is concrete evidence all that there is, or do we have to also appeal to things like rhetoric for something to be convincing?
Interesting. Okay, so I mean, there's two ways I look at this. Firstly, if you're going to make scientific claims, of course, then you are talking about a different standard of evidence, right? It needs to be objective. That's the first point. The theory itself, right? And this is where I like Graham Hancock. Okay, I have to say this. I first came across him in, I guess it would have been the 90s, when he did a theory about underwater civilizations. And that's, to me, that's the quintessential, like, that is a good idea, right? It's a compelling idea because there's a lot of common sense to coming out of the last ice age, right? The water levels obviously would have changed as the ice melted. We're talking about a lot of ice, obviously. So we're talking maybe 100 or 200 meters of extra coastlines all around the world, pretty much. Yeah, all around the world, of course, because it's water. And so it's highly likely that people would have been living on the sea edge as much as they did, certainly in through Homo sapiens history. And so as the water level changed, then there's a good chance that the civilizations would have been flooded and then had to move. And of course, this has led to, a lot of progress, right, on early prehistory when we don't have any documentation or any necessarily archaeological evidence. So there's been some work in the Black Sea, for instance, which has been very encouraging. People have put money into doing radio scans of that. And then, of course, they've obviously found underwater monuments and buildings off the coast of India, near Goa, and various other places around the world. And so, instantaneously, that's a compelling idea. Okay, now, how advanced? What are we calling a civilization then? What does this mean? Are we saying that Atlantis existed? Not
Yeah.
really. You know what I mean? Maybe in some idea, right? Theta in the in Santorini, in the Mediterranean, has been proposed as a possible site. Doggerland off in the North Sea has been proposed as a site. These are all places where it's possible that there could have been a pre-existing civilization. However, immediately when we talk about civilization, okay, we have a whole series of cultural and societal references that we're placing on the word. And that can't be the case when you talk about pre-existing humans, right? So immediately there's going to be some disconnect, right? So when he says there's a previous civilization, right? Well, what does that mean? A group of people? Well, I think there is some evidence that humans existed in North America, whatever, 25,000 years ago. I think that's highly possible. Is it a civilization? Well, in some sense, the way we use the word civilization in some general sense of a group of people that have a shared culture, right? Well, I think, Michael, you may agree with that. I think you were saying about the Clovis culture in North America, and that's quite likely. I think that there's also some medical or biological evidence that people existed up to maybe 35,000 years ago in South America, potentially. So at least, in terms of mitochondrial evidence.
Right.
So, again, we're just throwing terms around. And unfortunately, one of the problems with Graham Hancock is he likes to be ambiguous with his terms. Right? And I think he does it for good reasons. It sells books. It makes him very popular. He probably makes a good living out of it. He certainly did the same in Egypt when it came to the pyramids.
Yep.
Okay. So I think we've got, again, evidence. I want to try and use that word as much as possible. I think we've got evidence that he may not be as objective as his rhetoric.
Josh of Digital Hammurabi told me one time he had a conversation. I can't remember the name of the particular channel. I'm gonna say Zotan or Zotac. It's something begins with a Z, whatever. But it focuses on history. But rather than saying scholars say this, they say aliens are possible. And their viewership is 1,000 people, 30,000 people. They're making money, and it's not that they're telling lies. It's not that they're saying it's aliens. It's the implication, it's the idea. Same with Graham Hancock, leaving it vague, leaving it open, entertainment value and things like that. Nobody likes to be told this is the way it is. They all like to have their own interpretation of it. Make it more personal by being vague, like horoscopes.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
that's quite important in some ways. I mean, when I think about Einstein's relativity, I mean, it was popularized, and once it
Right.
became popularized, then people started taking notice and understanding and getting interested in physics, and I'm sure a lot of people became theoretical physicists just on the basis that they'd seen that film with Marilyn Monroe and Einstein teaching Marilyn Monroe about it, right? And that's just a cultural and civilizational cultural thing that's happened in our civilization, and it's benefited, physics and progress in science. So I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the rhetoric. It's just trying to be precise about the objective claims.
Mhm.
And that's the issue for me. Graham Hancock is trying to obfuscate some, exactly what he means when he says civilization, right? Is he talking about, like a civilization as we think about it, which is more advanced than we are today, existing in prehistory? I mean, Jungle Jargon and a few other people used to claim that the pyramids were built by a pre-existing civilization which had, metallurgy at their fingertips, advanced metallurgy at their fingertips, not just copper work,
Mhm.
and clearly that's incorrect. But there's no evidence for that in terms of scientific objective evidence, and there's certainly no archaeology which backs it up. So again, what are they relying on? Well, of course, they're relying on deductive arguments for which they're not
Right.
showing the premises to be sound.
Right.
And
And that's what one of the things you just talking about that, Simos, made me think because, Hancock's background's in journalism. And one of the things that he does really well that maybe historians and archaeologists could learn from, that's probably going to make historians and archaeologists hate me, but he does make it interesting. And one of the things that, one of the ways in which he makes it interesting is he adds this like mystery to it and poses it as a like intellectual problem. Now, the move that he makes after that is what upsets me and what upsets other people, and that's where he says like, well, and he is very vague about this a lot of times because I've watched a lot of I have not watched the new series, but I have watched a lot of his interviews and talks and stuff. He's very careful, and I've seen this in other areas too. Especially, it reminds me a lot of old creationist and intelligent design arguments, where he likes to give like counter examples to things and propose like examples that sort of contradict the established narrative. But when he's pressed about saying, like, okay, well, who were these people? Where did they exist? What sort of, do we have any pottery? Do we have any archaeological structures that they left behind? Once that gets posed to him, the argument kind of evaporates, right? But if it's just saying, like, well, how do you explain exactly how ancient Egyptians in 300 BCE moved this 1 ton block from this quarry all the way over here without modern? Well, then that's what kind of lends to the mystery and for some people the kind of credibility of what he's saying. Although, to be clear, we do have explanations for how those things happen. They're just not as sexy as Hancock's explanations.
Well,
They're also hard to figure out as well. There's universities
Yeah.
spend an awful lot of time. It's lost technology. It's a way of doing things that, over a period of time, we've just forgotten how to do.
Mhm.
also, it's also called an argument from incredulity. So just to point that out, that there's philosophy behind this, which says just because you don't know how something is done doesn't mean that what you're proposing is the way it was done. And so just because something's false or something isn't false doesn't mean that something else is true necessarily. So yeah, I'm just saying. Go ahead. You may as well answer that because
Yeah, Ree, I don't
know
know
I
anything
know the
about
answers.
this.
Okay, no,
Go ahead.
that's not true. So the Britons and the Picts are much later than Doggerland. Doggerland went under the North Sea. Doggerland is an area in the North Sea of high land, which probably disappeared some, I don't know, 8,000 BC, maybe something like that, just as a guess. And the only thing left of it these days is occasionally when the wind blows in the right direction, then you can still see some tree stumps in the middle of the North Sea, basically. But no, it's a very allegedly very rich area of Europe, where the North Sea is today, and it was there. People inhabited it before Britain became an island. So yeah, and the Britons and the Picts come much later. Like Britons and Picts are probably I don't know, 1,000 BC, something like that, maybe.
So this was also raised in the chat earlier, and I wanted to come back to it. Evidence can't always be repeated. Good evidence, maybe, but people use personal testimony as personal evidence all the time. So another question to you lot. To what extent does personal evidence play either in, to use Mathpig's earlier dichotomy, in how you evaluate your own beliefs or how you evaluate the beliefs that others are presenting to you?
You go first, Mathpig.
No, go on ahead, Simos. It's fine.
Well, I don't want to dominate the conversation. If you've got something
I
to
was
say,
double checking something and replying to something in the
okay.
chat.
So what credence do I put on personal evidence? Okay, so I mean, for me, personal evidence is if it's somebody else's, it's not evidence for me necessarily. But if there is some kind of what's the word I'm looking, empirical basis for me to believe that the evidence they're telling me about is true, then I'm not necessarily going to discount it as not being true. I'm not going to say it's false just because it's somebody else's personal evidence. In other words, especially as I say, if there's some kind of empirical evidence. I'm an empiricist, by the way. So for that reason, if somebody says I have a dog, then of course I'm going to say, oh, yeah, nice. What's its name? I'm not going to say, no, you don't. That's just ridiculous. But if someone says they have a god, then I am going to say, oh, I'm going to need some evidence for that because I don't have any empirical basis to believe that God exists. Does that answer the question?
Ask the question again, Michael, and I'll retort, please, if you could just.
Yeah, no worries. So the statement in the chat, good evidence, repeatability of evidence can't always be repeated, but people use personal testimony as personal evidence all the time. So my spin on that was, to what extent, either we'll start off with you as an individual, what sort of power does personal experience have for you, or personal testimony have for you? Is it convincing or not convincing? And then going back to that distinction you made earlier, if I were to try to convince you of something, whatever that was, how strong would my personal experience factor in you believing what I'm saying?
Well, in believing what you're saying, your personal testimony is your personal testimony. I haven't experienced it, so as Simos would point out with empiricism, it goes a certain point, depending on the context. Where if I walk up to you and I say, right, we're having a conversation about God, prove God, I need that. So he comes out with his personal testimony, and this was what he has experienced or she has experienced or whatever, But if the context of the conversation is, I want you to tell me what you believe, they then tell me what they believe, I ask them the reasons why, then that gives it, I don't want to say more weight or validity, but in the context of the conversation, I'm trying to find out the depth of the person, what, where, and how they look at things. So that personal testimony may not be evidence of a God, but it's definitely evidence of who the person is and how they look and think about things. From my own experience with personal testimony, it's the reason my name is what it was at the start. I've had personal testimonies, I've had things I can't explain. Quite recently, I've had an awful lot of deja vu, and I don't want to say premonition dreams, but I'm talking about dreams and I'm saying things, and then things are happening in a good way, but it's maybe a predictive power or seeing patterns or things like that. I don't understand, but I don't understand. And that's the point of my personal testimony. I'm putting that across. That in itself gives weight to me, which to a certain point gives me respect for other people when they describe theirs.
Apparently, you are not to be trusted when it comes to information about bugs. So,
well, compared to Brie, 100%.
right.
100%. Yeah.
I know quite not quite a lot about bugs, but I've taught 5-year-olds in a group at a funeral to distract them from death. Look, trees and bugs. Come look at these.
Mm-hmm.
I've been called a bug quite a lot.
No, I think Maya brings up a good point, and I want to come back to this types of personal testimony that you both kind of hit on, but the character of the person also kind of factors into this, right? How well you know the person or don't know the person, right? You're more likely to believe the personal test, or most people, not necessarily you, would be more likely to believe the personal testimony of somebody that they know and love, as opposed to the stranger on the
I would
street.
disagree. I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that so much. I've had
Okay.
experiences where I've said, right, I found a number on a girlfriend's phone, right? And, messages from a girlfriend. I ring the boyfriend or this guy, right? And ask him directly what the fuck's going on. He doesn't know about me. He doesn't know this. He doesn't know anything. He's going to tell me the truth because he has no motive with the person who I'm trying to, the person I'm going with or whatever has a motive, has a reason. Oh, I'm, hiding or whatever. So on the basis that there is no reason for a stranger to lie to me, to a certain extent in the right context, I would take what a stranger would say to me over a friend because I feel a friend would be slightly more defensive.
So, context then.
Always context, man. It's always context is key.
Yeah. So, what could there be a context? So, when both of y'all were talking about this, you made the distinction. Well, if somebody like told me something about their dog, you'd be more inclined to believe it. But if somebody told me about a conversation that they had with an angel, you'd be less inclined to believe it. So let's talk about that division.
Yeah,
Why that
nobody
division?
here in the panel believes that ultimate Jewish Christian had sex with God and he sits on his lap. We all laugh at him for that. That's a preposterous statement to make. But I have a dog. I do have a dog. You can sleep behind me there on the sofa. I don't need to show you, but you'll believe me on that. It depends on the statement they make. It depends on how they put the statement across.
Yeah,
He's just thinking about Jesus's lap right now. That's all he's doing, dirty Simos.
No. I'm looking at Brojo's thing, and I remember trying to get this point about empiricism through to Irenic one time, and I used the example of if you said, if someone you trusted said you had a fire-breathing dragon in the garage, would you believe them? And the point is no. We have a way of determining, even if somebody is very trustworthy, whether they are likely to be telling the truth. And again, we're talking about some kind of Bayesian epistemology here, right? The claim, the evidence of the claim. has to be extremely strong if the claim is going to be non-empirical. Okay, and that's simply because the prior probabilities are much higher for something for which we have no evidence for, or no previous reason to believe that it's true. With a dog, I've got every reason to believe that people have dogs because I know plenty of people that have dogs, and so my the priors that for that are going to be extremely high, and therefore it's not going to take much evidence to show me. If you just show me a dog collar, I believe you. Right? You don't have to show me the dog, but with a god, no, you're going to have to show me some miracles. Because I've got such a low probability, prior probability that God exists, that I'm going to need extremely strong evidence.
Yeah. You want your picture of him sitting on the lap.
I think I need even more than that.
Yeah, pictures can be faked. You want to watch.
I think I'm going to need some kind of semen sample. But anyway, look,
semen sample. It's better than watching, you know.
Just saying. Oh, and Savage says he has a name called a dog named Bottas, which I know is true, but it's a virtual dog. But anyway, look. So I mean, again, you know, I think it's really, this is the crucial thing, because like Irenic was defending the Christian stance that his personal experience is good evidence to believe that God exists. Right now, I mean, that is the key question that we keep coming up against in this community. And of course, the answer to it, for me personally, is to say that's good evidence for you. All right. And just the same way, if I had a personal experience, it would be good evidence for me. Okay. But it's not good evidence for anybody else. I would not expect anybody else to believe me if I made up some alien claim that I'd been visited by aliens. And you know, they gave me the anal probe of my life. Okay, I'm just saying, right? I wouldn't expect people to believe that, but if I believed it because it had happened to me, I would have a good justification for believing that it is true. Okay, so again, that there's a hard line here between whether it's good evidence for me personally, or it's good evidence for me to convince somebody else that it's true. That's a very, very sharp line. And I think a lot of Christians in our community, a lot of theists in our community, often make that mistake, that their personal experiences are going to be evidence for somebody else. And that's just false.
So you would think, so it would be sufficiently reasonable, or in philosophy, the jargon is a justified true belief, right? For somebody to believe in, let's say we're dealing with alien abduction, just to spice it up a little bit, right?
Yep.
So somebody would be justified in believing in the existence of extraterrestrials, and that extraterrestrials are visiting Earth because they had a personal experience of abduction. What I find interesting, that an interesting angle on that I would like to pose to both of you, is if you had the personal experience of being abducted, would you change your mind? Like, would that be sufficient? Would that be sufficient enough for you to all of a sudden start believing?
You know, how deep is the anal probe?
Maybe I shouldn't have used this example.
No,
you know, if aliens turned up in what I could justify as, say, a radioactive suit, and we'll pull fucking, what is it, Back to the Future 2, Back to the Future 1, whatever, you know, that guy convinced of it being an alien because he was wearing a radioactive suit. And he had technology more advanced and shit like that. But if that happened for us, we've already passed fucking Back to the Future. You know, our technology is more advanced than that. So it comes to the point of, you know, how convincing is the alien? Do I get to float? Am I going up on a transport device? What is actually happening with that, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Simos,
I'd simply say yes.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's okay if it's justification for me to believe that it's true. Now, that doesn't mean I'm saying that it is necessarily objectively true.
Right.
Because it's personal experience. Okay. However, if we can't believe our personal experience, then we're going to have to throw out a lot of fucking claims that we make. Okay. So it's not that we can doubt them. And again, I'm of this view that I don't choose to believe things.
No, you can't.
I'm convinced to believe things based upon some kind of justification or evidence. And if I believe it to be the case that I've been visited by evidence, then I have no choice in that.
Mm.
Right? Now, the only thing is, I would know that this is not an empirical claim, and as an empiricist, I would hugely struggle to look for other explanations which are more probable. Right, as
Yeah.
Hume's razor goes, or it's not Hume's razor. What did Hume say? Anyway, I can't remember the actual phrase now. But he
I know
has
what
a
you mean. Yeah.
he has a pithy phrase for saying, "Believe the lesser miracle."
Right.
Right, I think it's something like that. So
I've thought about this some because I've had a few people ask it to me, and I wish Maudie was here to get his input on this point. But yeah, I don't know if I would. So I've been asked, like, well, if you were to experience the divine, or if you were to experience, well, we'll go with extraterrestrials, right? I do agree with you, Simos, in that I think it is a sufficient condition for that person. I don't think it can be used to try to convince somebody else, because your personal experience extends to the tip of your nose in terms of its validity as an argument, right?
Yep.
But you're right in that we believe all sorts of things just based off of the uh, uniformity and repeatability of our everyday experience that we don't necessarily have justification for. Because I don't think we necessarily need justification for. I mean, that's why in philosophy we have these categories of, like, properly basic beliefs or assumed beliefs.
Exactly.
There are certain things that we just accept as true, like the experience of reality. Like, and the purpose of arguments like Descartes is not to convince us to not believe in reality, but is to test, like, what it is about what it takes for us to believe something epistemologically. It's more of a rhetorical device to kind of help us understand that. Because if you go down that route of extreme skepticism, then your criteria of there's no standard of evidence that could meet any sort of criteria. Anyway, so yeah, there's stuff that we believe all the time without needing, like, concrete convincing of, and the external world, I think, is a perfect example of that. But what I find interesting about the experience of the miraculous, or the experience of the otherworldly, so to speak, is that if I experience that, my first response would be to uh, I always joke, my first response would be to check myself into an inpatient facility.
Well, again, this is following Hume's rule, isn't it? Believe the lesser miracle. It's more likely. I mean, this is the classic one I remember is someone saying, what's more likely, that somebody resurrected from the dead, yeah, or that somebody was mistaken about it. And there have been far many. Oh, it's Occam's razors. Thank you. Yeah, there have been many more experiences of people being wrong about miracles than there have been actual miracles. So, just based on Bayesian probability, it's more likely that when somebody says they've witnessed a miracle, it's more likely they're wrong by a long way than the miracle actually happened. And so, really, there's never going to be any kind of epistemology which can justify such claims. I mean, that's just the nature of humanity. And the problem, I think that one of the big problems and reason that presuppositionalism is so strong in this community is because it gets around having to have any epistemology at all. You don't have, once you go down the presuppositional route, You're just talking about an ontological claim, and you're just asserting it to be so. And there's nothing you can't touch that, right? But other than to say, well, that's your personal experience. Okay, and that's why this is so important to understand that we are epistemologically bound, right? We can never really understand the ontology in the same sense. We can never unjustify our ontology with a deductive argument. The best we can do is have some kind of inductive argument, a posteriori, to justify why we should assume it to be true. And that's the best we can do as humans, as far as I'm concerned.
I want to definitely come back to that point. I have a question from a former coworker of mine. Hello, Troy. Thanks for stopping by. I don't know anything about this. Maybe y'all do. Opinion or knowledge on the Kennewick Man discovery, 1996, in Washington State. The controversy of evidence surrounding the discovery.
Yeah, I think there was a cave, and to my memory, there was something special, like it was the cave was dated to, like, I don't know how many thousands of years ago, but in it was a stone tool, which was considered to be much more recent. It was something like that, or a spear, or a binding. Maybe it was a flake, one of the flakes, a micro. What do they call it? Micro. What do they call the chips that they take off?
Oh gosh.
Blades, micro blade, I guess, is what it was.
Yeah,
I think it was something like that to be found in a cave dating back a lot further than these things were. But I think it showed a civilization which was some 20,000 years old, maybe.
So the controversy is that it had a really old date. This was in the Americas, I take it.
Yeah. It was a cave. I believe it was. I mean, I'm going off memory from 20 years ago, maybe more. Who knows? But you seem to suggest that there had been a civilization in North America predating the Indians, etc., or Native Americans.
So just the controversy was the Native American what was that act? It's to protect the people from digging in the graves. I mean, because you look at the history of in the United States of there's no history. The Native Americans don't have any history left because the Europeans plundered it all, right, when they came here. So yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to barge in on that. It's exciting to talk about it.
You're a force to be reckoned with, Bree.
Bree, if you don't mind, I'll add the link to your YouTube channel in the description of this video, but maybe give everybody a brief introduction.
Hi, I'm Bree. I'm from Hive Science, and my channel I have a science based debunking channel. I debunk all kinds of stuff. Today we had mantis aliens, and we had locating the Garden of Eden. Someone claiming they located it in the middle of a volcano in Africa. It was interesting. And then we talked Simos. I wish she'd been there. We talked about entomological warfare. Are you familiar with the concept?
I'm not. No. I mean, maybe I am in terms of Ben Elton wrote a book with that in. But...
Yeah. I mean, that's the primary source that a lot of citations come from is that book, especially the stuff about World War II, right?
I think it was called This Other Eden or something, actually. But just explain what you mean anyway, because I'm a little unsure.
Yeah, entomological war. It's anything, right? That you use insects as a weapon against your enemies. So, I mean, so it goes back to as deep as primitive people throwing a beehive into an enemy's cave to drive them out, to the Japanese during World War II lacing fly larvae with cholera and dropping them out of bombs in China.
Ooh.
400,000 plus people dead. Fleas and flies that were released from bombs.
Okay, I think the US may have done something similar with blankets, cholera and blankets, and
Well, yeah, but I don't.
slightly different, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Did
know.
that
I don't
with
know how
Native
much
Americans.
the people doing that to the Native Americans knew. I don't know because
okay.
they didn't have. I mean, there was no study of like immunology or
I think I would like to just say the point, the Ben Elton one, the book I mentioned, is a lot closer than I thought. It was actually about global warming, and because the world heats up, that expanded the region that the tsetse fly could exist in. And
who am I thinking of then? I'm thinking of the book
anyway, that
Six-Legged
because
Soldiers or something like that.
because it expanded
Then.
malaria basically into more of a global pandemic than
Yeah.
just
Okay,
a
I was thinking of Jeffrey
localized.
Lockwood. Yeah, he's got a book on that you might like if you're interested. It's called Six-Legged Soldiers. It goes and we had there were Canada was actually on the cutting edge on the Allies side. Canada was the country where all this wild research for insect weapon or weaponizing insect. I mean, most of it's an agricultural attack, right? All these countries were working with the Colorado potato bug to try to weaponize it to destroy enemy crops. The Germans actually had theirs backfire, and they ended up because they tried to set aside some land to do this experiment on, see how much damage they could do, and they got loose in Germany, and the rest is history. Of course, the Germans blamed the Allies and said that the French did it, and but that doesn't there's no historical evidence of that. It's likely that they either escaped from their own test facility or that they arrived through natural means in produce shipments.
Bree, I'm glad you're here because one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and of course anybody else can feel free to jump in, but I was thinking especially of your series on the cryptids, because in relation to this question of evidence, because a lot of cryptid, I mean, most of this comes from personal experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
I saw Bigfoot, or I saw the dog man.
Yeah,
or
it's
I
all this
saw
anecdotal evidence, right?
Whatever. Yeah. So let's talk about evidence in relation to that. Like, what would it take you, Bree, to believe in, let's say, Bigfoot's probably the most popular.
What would it take for me to believe in Bigfoot?
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, is it? I don't. So footage would not be good enough for me. If the footage was presented, I don't want to sound arrogant, but I would like to examine it myself before making any kind of assessment. I would ultimately leave it to the professionals to have the final say, but I would want to see it myself and have a look at it and know, you know. But I actually don't think I would be convinced by that unless it was backed by professional support. Now, physical evidence, a body, obviously, right? Even hair samples that we were able to definitively prove were an unknown hominoid. That would work.
If you had go ahead, Simos.
Well, I was just going to say something pithy, like I like to. Size 22 moccasins.
So you asked like if I had a personal sighting and I couldn't prove it, man, that would be
right.
that would drive me crazy. I would oh gosh, that would be nerve-wracking to have such an experience and not be able to relay it or get anybody to take it seriously. But I think at some point I would start doubting whether I actually had the experience, though. Because I know our brains are not recording devices.
Yeah,
again, but it's still Wi-Fi. That's hold on just a second. I'll be back in the studio,
Yeah.
guys.
No worries. I mean, this kind of gets back. This is why I raised the alien abduction example, right? So, and I wanted to pose this specifically to Bree because she has all of these series on cryptids, and so like her having a personal experience of Bigfoot would kind of present this kind of conflict, right? Or if Mathpig tomorrow converted to, whatever, right, had a vision of, let's say
Pantheism.
the Blessed Virgin or something like that, or
Pantheism.
pantheism.
Yeah, no, we're leaning towards pantheism,
Really? Okay.
No,
No.
not really, but just there's a lot of things that are making me question lately, as I discussed earlier, personal
Mm.
and shit.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what, I don't know, that angle is or Simos, I don't know, receiving a message from a mountain from Yahweh or something.
Hmm.
How would that factor into the personal credibility, not of you as a person, but in your personal belief system? I would like to get Bree's response, but I'll wait till they come back. I don't know.
You
Okay,
do know
well-
that I hang out with Richard once a week, so that answers your question. Back to Simos.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I think I mean, again, I like to be as charitable as possible. When somebody presents an outlandish idea, I don't personally. I think it's beholden on us as social creatures to at least go okay, and not just say, "Well, that means you're delusional, you're an idiot, you're stupid." I think degrading someone just because they say something which is outlandish is just wrong. Okay, and just from
Yeah.
the social point of view. So I do want to be careful about that. But at the same time, I'm an empiricist, right? That means that I want some kind of objective evidence, right, which I can be at least corroborated by other people in order before I'm going to take outlandish ideas seriously. That's completely apart from the ontological claims that we have to make about our position in the universe, etc. Those are completely separate. Reliability of memory. There are so many of these presuppositions that we have to take. But I do believe that for me to be, I'm going to be skeptical of all those claims which don't have this empirical basis, that don't have some kind of inductive argument which I can show, assuming it to be true, that it's going to lead to some kind of reliable results which do cohere with objective reality. And I think that's the important part. So if God were to talk to me for whatever reason, and that he existed, I would first, like you said, check myself into some some expert on the mind and just find out whether I'm suffering or likely to be suffering from any kind of delusions, etc., etc. First, this is me personally.
Right.
Darg, should you not be in bed, Darg?
Well, this is a really good question. How ridiculous would a claim have to be for the panel to dismiss it outright? Mathpig?
I
Just
believe
you
that this
first
is a
crack.
fake Darg because it's 3 a.m. where they are, so they're usually asleep. So I don't think this is the real Darg. I need evidence in a DM on Discord now as proof that this is the real Darg because they're usually asleep.
Yeah.
How would we know it's the real Darg? What would they need to message you? It means
Well, if they hacked their YouTube and their Discord, they would have to say things in a certain way. We discussed earlier because they are from Europe and where they are. Their English is of a certain type. And it's not that it's bad English or anything like that. It's very clear English, but it is that it's very clear. There's no slang. There's none of this. So I would know,
Well, I will say that they're like super smart out in the side chat. So with how
very
freaking
intelligent.
smart they've been, that seems like the real Dargendorp to me. But
Yeah. there you go.
Dar's going to help me tomorrow. I bought new thermal paste. They're going to hit me with my computer. Knock to a thermal paste.
Is thermal paste even a real thing? It sounds like you just
Yes,
made that
thermal
up.
pasting's a real thing.
Thermal
Oh,
paste.
Dog says I have DMs. Hold on, do I check my DMs?
Okay, so yeah, I think how ridiculous would a claim have to be? Again, I'm an empiricist, so unless there is some kind of empirical evidence that something is at least probable, then I'm going to dismiss it outright. That's always going to be the case. That's my limit of being skeptical. So no, I just think if there's no I dismiss, like Hume says, believe the lesser miracle. And if there's a better explanation for some kind of claim than the one being offered or proffered, then I'm going to believe that. I'm not going to believe the claim outright. It may be true still, and I'm not going to say that it's not true, but I'm not going to believe that it's true. I may not say that it's false necessarily, but I'm not going to believe it's true.
Bree, are you there?
Oh, Bree's back. Excellent.
I'm here, yeah.
What would you say? How would you answer this question? How ridiculous would a claim have to be for you to dismiss it outright?
Any claim that includes, this is a hard question. It's kind of because it's more of a gradient than, because there's some things that I would trust from certain authorities that I wouldn't trust from a layperson. If some rando from the side chat was like, "Hey, Atlantis was actually in New Jersey," I would be like, "Nah, I don't think so." But if Pat Lowinger showed up in here and he's like, "Hey, they found this evidence of a Greek culture off the New Jersey coast," I'd be like, "Ooh, really? That's interesting." So it's a degree.
Yeah, it seems like it depends on the type of claim that we're talking about as well, at least for me. So, my students will tell me all kind of like crazy historical facts all the time. And like you were saying, Brie, it kind of has to fall into a certain spectrum because history is such a strange topic. Like I'm absolutely positive some crazy stuff happened in the past. So, but if it's a claim about something that's like inherently, let's say like supernatural or extraterrestrial, well, then that's like, I don't know if I would dismiss it out. Well, even more complicated are, I deal with the history of science, and some of the stuff I read about modern physics is absolutely dumbfounding to me. So it depends on the type of claim and what the person's saying, I suppose. Some claims I would be quicker to dismiss, or not necessarily dismiss. I have a higher level of suspicion, let's say.
Higher level of skepticism.
Skeptical.
There we go.
Higher level of
thinker.
incredulity.
Yeah.
So let me ask you straight then, Michael. Do you consider yourself an empiricist? Is that a position you hold to? I don't mean 18th century empiricist either. I mean,
what do you mean? Let's start there.
You got to be careful because today people force you into a position of scientism when you don't want to even take that position. You have to once you decide that your arguments are going to be based on the scientific method, right? You have to stick to that methodology for the duration of whatever discourse you're engaged in. You can't just like, I'm going to flip this to philosophy right in the middle of the conversation. So then if you're taking that position and they take a philosophical position, then all of a sudden you're practicing scientism because you're following an empirical.
Oh, you said the magic word.
What'd I say?
Yeah, I don't
Scientism.
I don't think scientism is a real thing, by the way.
You don't think it's real?
No, I don't think it's real.
Well, we got a lot going on here. Simons,
Oh,
what do you
yeah.
mean? Let's say, let's
I
start off
think
with what you mean by empiricism.
right. By empiricism, I mean I think we can things can be confirmed through observation or theories which make the observation, or let's just say, I'm not sure exactly how to say it, but it's not just the observation itself which is required. It's also the paraphernalia which explains the observation. Okay, so mathematics, etc.,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
theories, etc. All of those things are included in empiricism because they help explain those observations in a way which is better than other theories like God did it or something
Yeah.
like this.
Then very tentatively, I would say yes. I would be an empiricist.
Yeah, that
um,
type of
yeah,
that type of
I think so.
empiricism.
I
Yeah.
think so. I'm not. For me, there's a lot tied up here with also like related questions of like scientific realism and yeah. So if from what you said, yes.
Okay. So the reason I then say scientism is a kind of misnomer, really, because I don't think many scientists believe in scientism, right? I really don't. And the reason
Yeah.
I say that is because it's not like, I don't think people are closing their eyes to anything but um, um, scientific truths, right? So, like you say, there's this level that we rely on. We rely on our memory, for which we have no a priori justification. And there's a whole load of a prioris for which we assume to be true, and the only reason we assume them, or we feel justified in assuming that they're true, is because of their effectiveness when it actually comes to explaining and manipulating the observations we have to give us objective results in the real world. And I think that's the important point. And that's why I say scientism isn't really a thing the way some theists think that, oh, you're just, you're a philosophical naturalist, right? For instance, they'll say things like that. And that's what scientism is, because you are immediately, a priori, discounting any chance of the supernatural, right? And I'm saying, well, yeah, obviously that's the case.
That's what
But
I what I
why?
run into.
Because why? Because that's the lesser miracle. Right? The lesser miracle is the very fact that we don't have any evidence for the supernatural, right? And until we do, we've got no reason to believe that it is going to play a part in any kind of explanation for any observations that we make. And
Well,
that's the fact of it, as far as I can see.
I would agree before I get to that. Yeah, so I live in Savannah, Georgia, and there actually is an atomic bomb right off less than a few miles from my house that was accidentally dropped from, I believe, a bomber during the Cold War. So, yeah, um, fun times. Um, yeah, Simos, I for the most part agree to that. I am really attracted to that's weird wording. I I like the position of provisional naturalism, um, which because I think that there have been times in science, and there still possibly will be times in science where supernatural explanations are appealed to, and even possibly not, maybe not supernatural is the right word. Okay, there have been times in the past where the supernatural was invoked by science and or scientific ideas rested upon supernatural assumptions. Um, they have subsequently been uh, outdated, so to speak. We've kind of moved beyond those explanations to other things, but I still think they're. I would say that I'm, you know, empirically, I would say that philosophically I'm a naturalist, but I don't rule out the possibility of the supernatural a priori. I still think there could be, although the overwhelming amount of evidence suggest otherwise.
Right. And that's the very point, though, isn't it? Is that we've got no reason to invoke it as an explanation, right? So it's not that. I mean, and as far as I'm concerned, that's still philosophical naturalism.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And and people confuse that, right? They're saying that a priori I am discounting any kind of supernatural, any kind of the supernatural cannot be. It has to be false, right? That's not the position of philosophical naturalism as I understand it. And I think this is again, targeted all in this word scientism, right? And it's just a targeted derogatory remark made because people don't understand
I
that
love
when
you.
somebody
Thank
is,
you.
you're welcome. Oh, it wasn't at me. Okay, sorry. Um,
Huh? Oh yes, it was.
oh, was it? Okay. I think
Yes,
because
Simos, thank you. I've been fighting people presenting the case that I'm adhering to scientism over and over again. It's like, no, honey, I'm appealing to Occam's razor, if anything,
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Again, that's why I like Hume's little phrase of, believe the lesser miracle, right? Because he's kind of saying in that very phrase, it's not that I'm against miracles. It's just that I'm against miracles which are so outlandish that there is a much simpler explanation. So in a sense, it is Occam's razor. But I like the fact that he uses lesser miracle, because that gives it some mundaneness or some commonality, at least some touchstone that we can have. Remember, he said this in possibly the 1500s. Okay, so this is before the scientific revolution. It's before the Enlightenment in some respects. I mean, it's not really, because he's the part of the Scottish Enlightenment, but before that kind of modern age, if you like. And so, in an age where people were very testy about belief in God, and it was illegal to be an atheist on pain of death, I like the phrasing, and I think we can learn something from that phrasing still, because we need to keep our minds open to philosophical possibilities and understand that that's nothing to do with scientific possibilities. Right? Until God turns up and says, no, I'm really doing this. Here it is. Here's your, as T Jump says, here's your gold brick. All right, and I'll keep coming back every day to give you one until you believe. Then we've got no reason to believe that there is a gold brick delivering God.
I like how you, in your explanation there, because you explained something that I've been thinking about over the past couple of months or so as I've been teaching this conspiracy theory class that I've been trying to articulate, but doing a really, really bad job at it. Because what we're saying here also applies to history as well, and kind of circling back around to people like Carlson and Hancock. I mean, I can say the same thing about the historical record and historical narrative and historical evidence. Part of the problem with these sorts of explanations, so like narrative's a bigger part of history than it is of science. Like part of history that makes it kind of more subjective, for lack of a better word, than science is that history's inherently telling a story, and story has kind of a artistic element to it. And for me, what's happening with someone like Hancock is that it's all story and no evidence. So the story itself might be interesting and compelling, but there's none of the backing that good historical narrative ought to have. None of that's there. But the other thing that's happening is that he's providing an explanation, and you see this with pseudoscience all the time. They're providing an explanation for something that already has an explanation. And just because you're offering an alternative doesn't somehow like justify that alternative. So with Hancock, he's providing an explanation for the appearance of civilizations in North America, or the Americas in general, and why their like mythology looks the same. But we already have an explanation for that. That doesn't need to appeal to something that we don't have evidence for. Likewise, something like creationism or intelligent design is providing an explanation for something like the structure of the cell, which already has an explanation, but their explanation is appealing to something that's extra scientific. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. Y'all feel free to respond.
Again, just to make the point, and the the historical method is a thing, right? And it's basically saying, look, we can't accept supernatural claims just because they're written in ancient books. Otherwise, we'd have to accept them all.
What if they're
Right?
carved on ancient tablets, though?
Yeah, or whatever. But you'd have to accept them all. That means, the Greek gods exist. That means that the Babylonian gods exist. That means that Jesus existed. That means that, and there
Could
are
you
so
imagine how
many
lit
miracles.
things would be if
Hercules
that was
was a
true,
real
though?
person. Sorry, say again.
Could you imagine how lit things would be if that were true? We'd have gods battling all over the place. The skies would be alive.
I couldn't imagine it now. Only that's a failure on my part, though. I don't watch enough movies. That's the problem. But anyway, I mean, I'm just saying that there is such a thing as the historical method, and it basically says that you cannot invoke supernatural explanations for the same reason, right? That as an empiricist, I wouldn't invoke a supernatural explanation. Exactly the same reason. So,
Right.
I mean, again, conspiracy theories, if they're based in history, I'm not interested in them whatsoever. I mean, they're just corruptions. They're literally just corruptions of our what's the word I'm looking for? Our evolution, in sense, our cultural evolution, and that's a problem. But that's not to say that they don't have a place in like understanding, right? I mean, it's interesting that the Greeks, for instance, have all of these myths interweaved with the story in the Iliad, all right, of a war against the Anatolians or Persians or whomever it was that lived in Boeotia. Then that's an interesting thing to see, that these people had to give explanations themselves when they had none, right? So that in itself is something interesting about humans, right? And explains why people nowadays believe the Earth is flat. It explains why people think they have had anal probes from aliens, right? Just to bring us back to my favorite subject. Nonetheless, but no, I'm just saying it explains it, right? It explains why people think they've had visitations from aliens. They want to feel special. They have no explanation for
Right.
this feeling within themselves, and that's an explanation. Okay, and there are simpler explanations, though, as Mr. Trocker or T. Cooker pointed out. There are simpler explanations which are more likely to be true as a result. Okay, because we have empirical evidence that people make stories up, right? Many more examples of people making stories up than actually people writing down truthful supernatural experiences. So again, as an empiricist, I'm just going to say, well, there you go. We don't have to believe that people have actually had visitation from aliens, when there is a much simpler explanation that people make these stories up to give them, aggrandize themselves and make themselves feel like they've had a life worth living, which, let's face it, if we all want, right?
So let me ask you a question that a student asked me this week in my conspiracy. It was after the class, but kind of related to this criteria of evidence, believability. What conspiracy theory, what supernatural claim, what cryptid do you find if we're talking about the nature of belief and evidence, do you find most probable or most believable? Let's get weird for a little bit. Maybe it'll get me a little bit more views. I don't know. Mathpig, what
Yeah, I'll go
what are you
last on
close to
this.
believing?
What am I close to believing?
Yeah, what weird thing are you close to believing?
That's a hard question. Like I've been through, I don't want to say I've been through it all, man, but I'm nearly 40, you know, I'm 39 now, you know, a lot of my young period of life was Western culture, Christianity, Salvation Army, and being in Northern Ireland, religion is more of a cultural thing. You know, it's trying to break barriers and that there. And the Salvation Army was both Catholic, Protestant, and it's sort of where my mother sent me. But you know, I left that. I've been a goth. I've been a pantheist. I've been, you know, I've been anti-theist and screaming at people and shouting and starting arguments. And where I stand now is, as Amber has helped me find the words, I live my life as if there is no God, but I am open to the idea that there could possibly be one. I've spent possibly this last maybe 2 or 3 years of my life in not great situations. Shit's been bad and awful, and it's been going quite well recently. And a lot of things that I don't want to say dreamt or anything like that, but as I explained earlier, in short terms, so nobody picks on me, and we'll leave it really vague. I don't dream an awful lot. I don't like dreams. I say my subconscious hates me. A lot of the times they're violent, graphic, and things like that. But when I do have an opportunity and when I do have a dream that's not like that, it's generally just a mundane thing. It's just shit. It's just whatever it was. I described to Richard in one of our panels about having a recent dream about just shaving in my mother's bathroom up the stairs with my father sitting on the toilet. It could be a wedding, it could be a funeral. You know, it hasn't happened yet, but we're having a conversation. We're just being mundane, and I'm getting ready for something. So it could be something happy, it could be something sad. I could go to a funeral and say I dreamt about this. I could go to a wedding and say I dreamt about this. It's on how you take these things. And I've had an awful lot of these things not happen lately, but make me question this, that, and the other. And I have found myself in throes of happiness, we'll say, and shouting up into the sky and up into the universe, you know, thank you, you took your fucking time, or it's about fucking time, you know. So I don't know where I stand now. I'm going to say agnostic because I don't have a fucking clue. And I think that's the most honest thing I can say.
Okay. Fair enough. Bree, which cryptid are you closest to believing in?
Sorry, what was that?
Which
I just blew her mind. Sorry, I just blew Bree's mind.
Bree, which cryptid are you closest to believing in?
Oh, definitely be one of the living. It wouldn't really be called living fossils, but like the thylacine, the Tasmanian wolf. Also, the Japanese wolf is another one that I would lean towards accepting as something that might be alive. A lot of these animals that were driven to extinction by man, it would be great to find a wild population in a pocket in some remote area. I would be stoked and ecstatic if we found a living thylacine. I don't think that there is one, but you know, as a ecologist I'm not an ecologist. As an ecology fan, I don't think it's possible. But if there was something that was found alive, it'd be something along those lines.
Nice. So I'll share mine, and then Simos, you wanted to go last. So mine, because I was teaching this conspiracy theory class, and somebody from my on my YouTube channel sent me the conspiracy theory chart, like with the most believable at the bottom, and then, you know, like lizard
Iceberg.
people. Yeah, the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
Like lizard people running the New World Order at the very top, or, you know, something like that. The moon being a giant satellite, David Icke type stuff. the most believable for me, I'm not saying that I do believe it, to be clear, but the most believable would be probably that my mind goes straight to the FBI being intimately involved with the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Or the JFK assassination's also pretty. If I had to bet money on
So it's
which one was true,
assassinations that you think there's some maybe truth to. Yeah.
not well that and that this is where it gets confusing and tricky. Or the other one that I'm inclined to believe, I don't say that I do, but I'm inclined to believe is that the CIA, FBI was involved in the drug trade in the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's
Well-
100%.
Well, we know that they were to some extent, but the idea that they were peddling like hard drugs to disenfranchised communities, especially in cities, that they were targeting those people. That's the conspiratorial part.
I
Right?
see. Yeah.
To me, that is like very believable, but I have to withhold. I have to be a good critical thinker and withhold judgment because there's no concrete proof of that. Simos, you want to close this out?
Okay, no worries. Okay, so could you just ask the question again to me, because it's if you wouldn't mind.
No worries. Which, and it doesn't have to be which supernatural claim, which conspiracy theory, which extraterrestrial claim or story are you closest to believing?
Okay, yeah. So none of those. However, the reason I came to the conclusion that none of them were there is because I investigated, right, and I found explanations which were better. But a few things I didn't find explanations for, mainly, and that's what's fascinated me in my life the most, right? So what I'm referring to here is the human brain. What is it about the human brain that makes the hard problem of consciousness? Why do we feel this way, and we give such weight to our intuitions when clearly our intuitions are sculpted by a process which doesn't give us truth? That to me is a really exciting question, and in my life, what I've tried to do is engage with that and engage with the power, the sense of internal identity, which that can give me, right? And it allows me then to lead the life that I've decided to lead. So for the first, when I became an atheist when I was 7. The way that happened to me is that I had an out-of-body experience where I flew across the universe and came back again, and then realized that the universe was natural, and therefore God was unnecessary.
Sweet.
And as soon as you get God being unnecessary, then there's no reason to believe God exists, and that leads you directly to strong atheism, as far as I'm concerned. Now, that then led me down other paths, right? Because now I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, was that out-of-body experience supernatural? Okay, that's kind of weird. There is a dichotomy here which needs to be investigated. And then I spent the next 5 years, or maybe longer, into my early teens anyway, trying to find out whether there was such a thing as powers, external powers of the mind. Right? Was the mind able to influence reality in an objective way, other than me actually just blowing on the pencil as it moves across the desk, or me picking something up and dropping it, right? Do I have to have this interaction with the real world through my physical body, or can my mind interact with the physical world excluding my physical body? And I spent whatever till I was 13 seriously like trying to be a mentalist, right? In the supernatural sense of the word. Okay, and of course I failed miserably, and eventually then found empiricism and went, oh, okay, yeah, this makes much more sense. I know that. But why do I have these feelings still? Right? And then I tapped into those feelings and understood that that's creativity. That is literally my mind trying to throw anything at the world in order to make sense. And in fact, when I threw things, abstract things at the world in order to make sense, I came up with things which were entertaining, and in fact, entertaining to other people. I used to tell stories to get when I was 14. I used to make up stories to get girlfriends. Okay, and I would literally sit there and make up these stories about all sorts of fucking shit, and they'd all go, "Oh wow, that's incredible. Is that true?" And I go, "Well, it's true. Yeah, it's true for me. It's true in the sense that I made the story up." And then they go, "Oh, that's and then great, I'm in." So I was happy, and that was early experiences, and then obviously I've been playing music for some time by then, and so I felt there was a natural synergy then between trying to understand my brain and letting my brain just go wherever it wanted to go, but not believing it to be fact, not believing it to be objective, just believing it to be aesthetically pleasing, right? And once I could master that, then I realized I had a career in being creative, right? And so then my life had real focus, because I was no longer subject to disciplines which I knew I was never going to be good at. I was never going to be a philosopher. I was never going to be a pure mathematician. And now I don't have it in me because I can't concentrate for that long. But what I do have in me is this sense of making the ridiculous and the abstract make sense. And in that respect, I found a real path for something which is supernatural, in that it's an imagination. And for me, that's the type of supernatural which I try to embrace. Imagination. Does that make sense?
It does. That was a very eloquent close.
Thank you.
That was great. No, I appreciate you sharing that.
No problem.
Well, thank all of you for joining me this evening. As I mentioned before, you can find more about all of these wonderful panelists in the description of the video. Bree, yeah? No? I thought Bree unmuted to say something. I was just...
No, I was just preparing to say bye when you said bye.
Oh, okay. You can find more information about all these wonderful people in the panel below. Thanks for stopping by, chat, for participating. We'll see you all later. Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody out there in the chat as well. I've really enjoyed reading the comments, and thank you for correcting me when I needed correcting. But anyway.
Awesome.